The World War II heat hack soldiers used to survive the impossible still works today. Some wartime secrets don't survive because they were classified. They survive because the people who use them never stop talking about them. And then, slowly, over decades of peace and convenience, everyone else forgot. But every now and then, one of those raw, rugged methods from the past claws its way back into the present, because it still works. The story of this trick doesn't start in a workshop or laboratory. It starts in half-bombed homes, burnt-out villages, woodland dugouts, and frigid bunkers where men had to scrape warmth from whatever was left behind. By the middle of the war, both the Allied and Axis forces were starving for fuel. Coal was rationed, wood was scavenged. Civilians burned old furniture just to make it through winter. And soldiers, they had to improvise. They had to stretch every ounce of heat. That's when the coal sock first started making the rounds. A small hack whispered among engineers, frontline infantry, and quartermasters who spent their nights fighting off cold that could sap strength faster than enemy fire. Nothing fancy, nothing high-tech, just a battered wool sock, a handful of crushed coal, some water, and a little patience. But what that combination did was remarkable. Because loose coal burns fast. It flashes up, scorches hot, wastes fuel, and then collapses into ash in a couple of hours. Soldiers needed slow, steady heat. Heat that stayed quiet. Heat that didn't send sparks bursting through cracked chimneys or thin roofs while enemy scouts were watching. So here's what they did. They took coal and crushed it just enough to pack tightly. Powder burned too quick. Big chunks burned too wild. Medium pieces were the sweet spot. They filled a wool sock, damaged ones, thin ones, socks so torn they couldn't be worn anymore. Those were perfect. Wool breathes. It holds shape. It doesn't melt. It creates a little pocket of resistance. At first, the sock steamed. It hissed. It looked like it wasn't doing anything. But underneath that steam, something genius was happening. As the sock dried, the coal inside began to smolder instead of burn. The wool slowly charred into a hardened mesh, almost like a homemade briquette casing. And once it settled, that little bundle burned for 6, 8, even 10 hours depending on the coal. Soldiers could warm their hands, dry their boots, and get real heat through the longest, coldest stretches of night. It wasn't a miracle. It was engineering born from desperation. And you know it worked so well that engineers on the Eastern Front wrote about using 3 socks in rotation. One burning, one drying, one being prepped. Civilians caught on too. In diaries from France, Belgium, and Poland, there are these casual notes about stuffing coal into socks as if it were, well, obvious. But when peace returned and fuel became plentiful, the trick faded. Why stretch coal when you could just toss more in? Why conserve heat when you had central heating and endless refills? The method dissolved into the shadows of wartime memory. But here's the thing. What worked in 1943 still works today. You can recreate it with basic materials. A thick wool or cotton sock, never synthetics. They melt and give off fumes you do not want. Use crushed charcoal or coal in medium-sized pieces. Pack it tight so there's little air inside. Knot or stitch the open end. Soak the entire thing in water. Place it on top of already hot coals. Let it steam before it glows. Give it time to find that perfect smolder. Once it does, you've got steady, radiant heat that outperforms loose chunks every time. Modern survivalists have taken this a step further. Some use canvas pouches. Others use denim sleeves. The idea stays the same. Restrict airflow, slow ignition, force a controlled burn. Even if you only have charcoal and not coal, the method still works. The smolder lasts longer, and the heat release stays stable instead of spiking. In a world obsessed with technology, this old method is a reminder that survival doesn't always come from gear. It comes from mindset. From understanding how materials behave. From thinking like the soldiers who had no choice but to innovate with scraps. It's a piece of World War II history that deserves a revival, not because it's nostalgic, but because it's smart. Every forgotten trick like this one shows us how people survived when the world gave them nothing, and every time you rebuild one of these lost methods, you get a small, honest look into how they lived, struggled, and fought off cold that could break even the strongest men. If you learned something new and want more forgotten survival systems, off-grid tactics, and real historical methods revived in full detail, make sure you subscribe to History's Survival Code and share this with someone who appreciates real history and real skills, not the watered-down versions.